we as analysts, understanding of who are going to be those parties that are not going to be really on our side along the way of our reform.
When you put the numbers up for cottage industry, you meant what often is measured as micro enterprises?
No, cottage industries are industries that are used within the household, not micro enterprises. Well, they sometimes get micro enterprises also add those, but I only talked about the kitchen, you know, the backdoor industries. Yes, please.
How would you go about helping? Because I understand with Peru, or like even in Guadalajara, I was just there and I saw similar. But what about like the City of the Dead in Cairo, where you have people living in the cemetery? The City of the Dead in Cairo, where they're like living in the old.
I worked there.
And how would you address that? Because those are funeral plots.
I wouldn't.
I mean, the government's running electricity and plumbing.
No, of course. They give them electricity, they give them water, they recognize them because they need them to vote for them, right? Sure. So as a company now, I know exactly what needs to happen, what doesn't need to happen. So you have to have political will. There is no political will in Egypt to do that change. You have to have appetite for reform. So in other words, there is an agreement, a communal agreement, a government agreement, that this is really a problem. And they say, yes, Ms. Panaritis, please come join us. Let's have lunch, dinner, you know, whatever. Let's talk, let's have a seminar, let's talk to the bankers. We should do it. But then you go outside the office of the president and you realize that the president that actually says that we should do it is one person, but the actual people that have the decision power and the appetite, in other words, for reform around him are not that much, they're not that hot about it. So what am I going to do? Put my penny in Egypt or put my penny in Bulgaria, where absolutely every single person, including the municipalities and the president and the prime minister, they really want to see their country changed. So what we do is we use a snowball effect. We start small and we go to the countries that have an appetite for reform. This is not a blanket thing. You don't need to do it to everybody. And it's voluntarily done. So the government takes on, moves on, and then we continue. In Peru, we didn't do it throughout the whole country. We started in Lima, in the outskirts that I was showing you. And then it was funny because we created an isolated area, jurisdictional area, where the new legal system and rules were applying with a new registry, a brand new registry, meaning that everything that existed before was taken out and pulled into the new registry. So you didn't have the old and the new at the same time. And then those guys, after exactly a year, produced extraordinary results. So the neighbors were saying, wait a minute, how come, Pedro next door is doing so well, has, a second story, he's working better, he's traveling abroad, he's doing whatever. I want to have the same. So I was really impressed because it was a time, as I said, of huge reforms where everybody was doing, was demonstrating against privatization, was demonstrating against structural reforms, and demonstrating against macroeconomic adjustments. And one day, I go to Lima, and I'm trying to drive again to the center of the city. And they say, oh, señorita, there is another demonstration today. I'm thinking, but I thought this was done. It was 6 months ago we did all these reforms. No, this is a different demonstration. I said, what is this demonstration? It was the neighboring communities that had gone down to outside the Congress with big, posters saying, we want the same reform you did to that community. It was like a demonstration for reforms. Amazing. I was so amazed. So that's why Cairo, I wouldn't do it. I tried, but it didn't work because of lack of appetite. Yes, sir.
I really appreciate the talk because many economists don't take into account the informality of the poverty situation. And I'm coming from India and I teach and research there. I was thinking about the slum situation in Mumbai. Dharavi, the world's largest slum, which you might have seen in Slumdog Millionaire. There the situation is very different. The slum people are told that you can have private property, but the private property they can have is disproportionately small compared to what they are having now. So the informal property, when translated into private property, is disproportionately disadvantaged.
So they don't
for the
have
poor.
an incentive
So the
to
poor
have it.
are resisting
Of course.
that translation, you see. And why this happens? Because it's not just the political will, but the situation of power which is involved, and big corporate houses are trying to monopolize this land.
Do you remember the triangle I showed you, where it was the government, the private capital, and the citizens? So it sounds to me that over there, that triangle is not working. That triangle is really just one angle, where the private investors are in bed with the government, telling them, all we're going to do, we're going to probably build up, right?
That's right.
Rather than spread.
Yeah.
We're going to build up, we're going to make a ton of money, of course, but that's not really an issue. The issue is we're going to really help the poor people in Mumbai sit there. Oh gosh, I've seen so much of that. Yeah, so top-down is not a solution.
So I wonder whether this formula will apply to such cases.
It would, but you see what is interesting? It would be interesting what I did. I worked in, the city I was telling you was Palestinian Authority. I walked in and everybody was telling, no, it's not going to be possible, it's not going to be possible. Well, we made a whole presentation to Abu Mazen, the president of us. Yeah, and I was just thinking we're going to have the third intifada, telling him exactly what I had just come up with in terms of, lack of confidence, levels to the government, the problems that you're just talking about are very, very open and very obvious there as well. And the guy really understood it because he's representing both, you see, the citizens and the private. And as a matter of fact, the private capital can make far more returns, far more money, by doing, by moving from a one-shot game to a continuous game, right? Chapter 3. From one-shot game to a continuous game, because you don't just do a transaction today, you're engaging yourself to a multiplicity of transactions. Bank of America is a perfect example in this country that is doing exactly that. Be happy to talk more.
It was.
Could you talk a little more about the problems of promoting these reforms from the World Bank as opposed to your private company?
Yeah. I go in as a private capital in the private company, and I get paid at the end of the reform with a position of the upside. So if I don't do well, I'm not going to get paid. If I do well, I'll really get paid. I'll get paid a handsome amount. So I align my incentives together with the incentives of the government and the citizen. This goes very long way with government because I'm not a consultant and I'm not a one-shot investor that wants to come in and bring, whoever. And it's in the beginning, it's a lot of burning of cash from my end. So, I haven't really only mortgaged my garage. I've mortgaged more than that. But I really believe in that change, in reform. And I see it happening. And that also applies in the way it is presented to the citizens. We're very flat. That's it. Now, from the side of the institution of the World Bank, I shouldn't call it institution, organization, but also, I'm sorry, Chapter 2 explains why
This is pure Northian.
why such organizations were not really devised to do development reforms. They were devised to reconstruct Europe after the war. And Europe didn't really have institutional issues, right? It had, the institution of justice was there, the institution of education was there, the institution of property rights was more or less there. What was really missing was roads and bridges and dams, because they were all bogged down to nothingness. Now, we move on after the Cold War to an organizational, to a reality, a realm that is rather different. It's a realm where, property is important, judiciary is important to have it organized appropriately. And it's interesting to see the distinction between Argentina and Peru. Argentina had a default in 2000 again.